Hey, what's up guys? If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. I'm Anthony. Glad to have you here. Pull up a seat, have a drink, have a smoke. It's all good. So today I've accepted the top film in each genre challenge from fellow YouTuber Sean at Lost in the Reel. A link to his awesome channel will be in the description below. Thanks for the shout out and the tag, Sean. Okay, on to my listing. What follows is my favorite movie from 10 different genres. This category was actually an easy pick for me. Nothing could top Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece, The Shining, from 1980. Based on Stephen King's novel, this movie is basically a deep dive into madness. I saw this movie when I was probably a bit too young and it really stuck with me. Granted, I probably had my hands over my eyes through most of it, but still, I got the point. Jack Nicholson, Shelley Duvall, Scatman Crothers, and Danny Lloyd were all spectacular in this movie, but face it, they had to be. Stanley Kubrick wouldn't have accepted anything less. I'm hard-pressed to even think of any other horror movie that's been referenced and parodied as much as The Shining. I can't even think of any other movie that's been analyzed and dissected as much as this. Just goes to show how much this movie really resonates with people. The Shining's a slow burn nightmare. If you have yet to see it, definitely check it out. So ever since I was a kid, Pinocchio was always my go-to favorite animated movie. It's one of Disney's most iconic films, but in 2018 a movie came along called Into the Spider-Verse. And with that, Pinocchio got thrown into the wood chipper. Just kidding about the wood chipper thing. I still love Pinocchio, but yeah, Into the Spider-Verse was awesome. I already spent a decent amount of time in my Spider-Man ranking video gushing over this movie. As I mentioned there, this movie is a visual masterpiece. It's a fun, fast-paced, energetic thrill ride. If you haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse, I highly recommend it. I'm telling you, it's a Spider-Man movie you never knew you wanted until you got it.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
So this was a bit of a tough pick, but for best action movie, I went with 2015's Mad Max Fury Road. Directed by George Miller, this modern action template starred Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron, and both of them kicked ass. You'd think that after the collapse of civilization, the world would be in ruins. It is, but in this movie, the ruins look fucking incredible. I can't think of any other movie that can top the insanity and the intensity of Mad Max Fury Road. The main thing I dug about Fury Road was that it was relentless. Just balls to the walls, head smashing action. Plus, we got a weirdo playing a fire spewing electric guitar. What more do you even need?
Mark! Yeah! Ing! Yeah! Bird! Yeah! 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 Mockingbird don't.
So my pick for best comedy, appropriately enough, required zero thought whatsoever. Dumb and Dumber. This comedy classic starred Jim Carrey, Jeff Daniels, and Lauren Holly. It was directed by the Farrelly brothers. I love this movie. Even after all these years, it still makes me laugh. And when it comes to comedies, that's not always the case. I mean, how many times can you laugh at the same jokes? Yet, whenever I revisit this movie, I find that it still works. I love these two goofballs. Jim Carrey was in his prime here. In the 90s, there was no stopping him. This movie's comedy gold, in my opinion. Fire up the flux capacitor, because best sci-fi, I went with the 1985 classic Back to the Future. Directed by Robert Zemeckis, starring Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly, and of course Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. It's virtually impossible to watch this movie and not love it. It's one memorable moment after another. Marty skateboard through town, while The Power of Love plays, George McFly's awkward laugh, the introduction of Doc Brown and a DeLorean, Marty accidentally zapping himself back in time. From frame 1 all the way up to the high-tension clock tower scene, this movie's perfection. I don't think a lot of people necessarily think of this movie in terms of sci-fi. Maybe they think of it more as an adventure movie, but I'm gonna go with it for sci-fi. I'm not really much of a Western fan, I've only seen a few to be honest, but for me, Clint Eastwood's The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly from 1966 is gonna be my pick. This film was directed by Sergio Leone, who is essentially the father of the spaghetti westerns. Knowing that, how could I not give this movie a #1 spot? The movie also starred Lee Van Cleef and Eli Wallach, who actually stole the show. The movie's well known for its masterful cinematography and of course its amazing score, which was composed by Ennio Morricone. To be clear, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is an epic. You don't just watch this movie, it's more like an experience. On the surface, the story is about two men who can't stand each other, but they're stuck together in the search for a fortune and gold. The journey of these two anti-heroes is completely captivating, every damn step of the way. There's actually a lot to break down in this movie, so hopefully I can knock that out in the future. So, because of the laws of the internet, this can't be a 5-way tie between Logan, The Dark Knight, Spider-Man 2, Days of Future Past, and Infinity War. So, I'm gonna go with Logan from 2017, which was directed by James Mangold. With this movie, in my mind at least, we wrapped up the entire Fox X-Men franchise. Logan starred Hugh Jackman as a much older and grizzled Wolverine, as well as Patrick Stewart, again playing Professor X. This was the rated R Wolverine movie we thought we'd never get. And hey, what do you know, it worked. But it wasn't just the R rating that made this movie great. It was the rich story which took inspiration from the classic Old Man Logan comic by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven. This was an ass-kicking berserker finale. It's no wonder Hugh Jackman has been hesitant to ever return to this role. As much as I'd like to see him slicing apart the bad guys in the MCU, seeing him return might make this exit a little less special. Okay, up next is romance, and if anyone knows anything about romance, it's me. My choice for this category is Dirty Dancing from 1987. It was directed by Emile Ardolino. Dirty Dancing starred Patrick Swayze as dance instructor Johnny Castle, and Jennifer Grey as Frances Baby Houseman. If you've heard the reference, nobody puts baby in a corner, well, here's where that comes from. Although I actually prefer a different quote from the movie.
I carried a watermelon.
So this was a coming-of-age story about a young woman vacationing at a resort in the Catskills. The story took place in the summer of '63. The relationship between Baby and Johnny was essentially the heart of the movie, but there's also a lot more going on here. Baby was a daddy's girl who came from a privileged upbringing and a sheltered life, whereas Johnny and the rest of the dancers, servers, and workers at this resort were struggling and hustling to get by, which was a fascinating dynamic and served as a commentary on how different classes relate to each other. The movie's well known for its dance numbers and of course the music, which was an interesting mix of 50s and 60s classics and of course 80s pop culture hits like Hungry Eyes and I've Had the Time of My Life. Dirty Dancing, there you go. There was no way a list like this was gonna go by and I was gonna not mention a Star Wars movie. So with that said, for the category of Best Adventure Movie, I went with Star Wars A New Hope from 1977. Of course, directed by George Lucas. Star Wars featured Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, and Harrison Ford, but come on, you know that, we all know that. This movie obviously had elements of sci-fi and drama, but in my mind it's one of the best adventure movies. A young hero and his robot buddies help save a princess. This was the movie that started it all, and by all, I really do mean all. Without this movie there'd be no original trilogy, no prequels, no sequels, no Clone Wars, no Mandalorian, and worst of all, no Grogu. You think the world's shitty now, imagine a world without Baby Yoda. Interestingly, the last pick on my list is actually my second movie choice based on a Stephen King novel. For Best Drama, I went with Shawshank Redemption from 1994. This movie is a masterpiece. The Shawshank Redemption was written and directed by Frank Darabont. As I mentioned, it was based on Stephen King's novella, Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption. Tim Robbins starred as Andy Dufresne, a man serving a life sentence for killing his wife and a lover. Morgan Freeman also starred as Red. The entire cast of this movie was phenomenal, but to me this was the best work I've ever seen from Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman. At the heart of the film is a decades-long enduring friendship of two convicts. This film takes many twists, many turns. It's a rewarding, emotional roller coaster ride from start to finish. It's very obvious why it tends to rank very high on many people's lists of greatest movies of all time. Those are my picks. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Down below, I'm going to include my 7 tags. These are all very cool people who I followed over the last 7 months or so. Hopefully you guys participate. In any case, check out their channels, check out their videos, subscribe, support, you know the deal. Thank you for listening. I totally appreciate it. Later.